Good afternoon, everyone. How is everyone doing today? You excited to see and hear from Carrie Coon? Awesome. Well, I'm Alex Nicholas Coon. I'm the executive director of the Massillon Museum. And by a sign of applause, how many of you have seen the Gilding Northeast Ohio exhibition yet? Excellent. I wanted to thank Georgia Paxos and the Canton Palace Theatre for providing this gorgeous venue. Her entire team has been amazing in allowing us the opportunity to host you all, have a screening of season 2, episode 8, the Opera War finale episode. Those of you who haven't seen this series or aren't caught up, I'm sorry. You'll just have to accept that, just focus on the costumes, maybe not the narrative, because that's what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about the fabulous costumes that really set the tone for the show and are what inspired the exhibition at the Massillon Museum. So just a little housekeeping. Of course, there are concessions of which you can partake. The episode is about 56 minutes long. We're going to screen that, and that will be followed by an interview with our guest curator, Brian Centrone, and Kasia, the lead costumer for the Gilded Age show, who will be zooming in from LA because she and her team have been nominated for several creative Emmys. So she couldn't be with us in person, but she has devoted her time to sharing her process and answering questions related to the costuming for the show. And then, of course, Carrie will be here, and you will have an opportunity to ask questions after that interview period. There will be microphones at the ends of the aisles, and we ask that you come to an orderly fashion, and we'll get it to as many questions as we can. So I'll be back after the episode has concluded, and I'll acknowledge some of our key partners and introduce our special guests. But for now, I welcome you to just relax, enjoy, and take in the splendor of the 19th century. Thank you. Thank you all for taking that in, and thank you again to the Palace for securing that screening, so all of the garments and the scenery is fresh in our mind. I know you're eager to get to the conversation, but unlike the announcement that was made at the Met, I do want to recognize people and say a little more than thank you, so I hope you'll allow me that indulgence. As you know, Gilding Northeast Ohio, Fashion and Fortune, 1870 to 1900, the exhibition currently at the Massillon Museum, is funded by a major arts enhancement and exhibition grant. That is provided by ArtsinStark and Visit Canton, so I'd like to extend everyone, please, a big round of applause to our funders. And I'm going to also list all of the people. It's certainly not extensive of everybody who pitched in, but when I call your name, or if you're a representative of the organization who made any of these programs that align with the exhibition or the exhibition itself possible, I'd like you each to stand and be recognized, and if everyone would please hold their applause until the end, that would be wonderful. But I want to give these people who worked so hard the opportunity for you to see how they helped assemble such a beautiful collaboration. So again, I know there are representatives here from ArtsinStark and perhaps Visit Canton. So if you'd please stand. Kevin Anderson, who built the scenery for us. Andy Rock Fine Arts Services. Joanne Arnett. Ann Bissonette. Clovernook Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired. Mary Jane Corwin. David Dingwell. Patricia Edmondson. Dr. Tamika Ellington. You all have to stand and stay standing. It's your moment. Josh Erickson, HBO. Sarah Hume, Ines Majori, the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I don't know that we have reps here tonight, but thanks to the Met. Mickey Muckelrath, Museum Acrylics. Susan Nason, Mark Potoko, Repros Inc., Sarah Robers, Hannah Spicer, Jordan Stock, Julietta Tripoli, Patrick Wiley, Chris Woodyard, Leanna Yoder, the staff of the Massillon Museum. All right, just hold one moment. and the many partners with whom we work, some of whom have fabulous exhibitions on view, like the Western Reserve Historical Society, who, by the way, if you notice the scene with the servants who are working by looking at the ads in the paper by candlelight, there's a fabulous exhibition that demonstrates the way garments look in candlelight. So you must see that before October 20th. The Canton Ballet, Canton Palace Theatre, are gracious hosts, of course. The Canton Symphony Orchestra, Explore City Tours, who have a fabulous McKinley inauguration dinner-inspired program coming up. Kent State University Museum, the Lyons Lincoln Theater, Margie Vogt, the William McKinley Presidential Library and Museum, the National First Ladies Library, the Ohio Arts Council. I'd mentioned ArtsinStark and Visit Canton, Roving Rogue Productions, Spring Hill Historic Home and Underground Railroad Site, and of course, all of the museum staff. Would you please give these individuals a round of applause? You all deserve it. You all made this possible. So I'm going to read the introductions for our three guests from whom you'll be hearing, and then we'll welcome that out on the stage and on the screen. So first, our esteemed curator of the Gilding Northeast Ohio exhibition and today's interview moderator, Brian Centrone. Centrone is a fashion historian specializing in late 19th British and American menswear, 20th century American menswear, queer fashion, pop culture fashion, and Barbie and Ken fashion and history, which my daughters love to talk to him about. He co-curated the exhibition Gray Area, Authenticity, Value, and Subversion in Fashion at the 80 WSE Gallery in New York. He guest curated the exhibition The Cunning Wrinkle of Newness, 19th Century Origins, Implications and Adoptions of the Trouser Crease at the Harold L. Drimmer Library in Valhalla, New York. His research has been published in various magazines and journals like Threads and the FIDM Museum blog and the Fashion Institute of Technology History Timeline. His exhibition and book reviews have appeared in Dress and the Journal of Dress History, respectively. Centrone holds an MA in visual culture, costume studies from New York University, and is currently a faculty member at SUNY Westchester Community College in New York. Kasia Walicka-Maimone, who is joining us by Zoom, is a costume designer whose work spans theater, film, and television, which was on brilliant display in the episode you just saw. Recent credits include HBO's 2 seasons of The Gilded Age, and I Know This Much Is True. Her recent films include Pale Blue Eyes by Scott Cooper and last year's Oscar winner, The Story of Henry Sugar by Wes Anderson. Her credits of film and theater include A Quiet Place, Part 1 and 2 by John Krasinski, Moonrise Kingdom by Wes Anderson, Capote, Foxcatcher, and Moneyball by Bennett Miller, Black Mass by Scott Cooper, Ready Player One and Bridge of Spies by Steven Spielberg, Deepwater Horizon by Peter Berg, and the Philip Glass operas Les Enfants Terribles and The Sound of a Voice. And Carrie Coon is one of Hollywood's most sought-after talents with a wide variety of roles across film, TV, and theater. She's garnered acclaim throughout her career and continues to cultivate her impressive body of work. She could most recently be seen in Azazel Jacobs' His Three Daughters alongside Natasha Lyonne and Elizabeth Olsen. The acclaimed film premiered at the 2023 Toronto International Film Festival and opened in theaters just this past weekend. It will soon be released by Netflix. She will also star in the independent film Lake George, directed and written by Jeffrey Reiner, and opposite Shea Wiggum. Carrie recently concluded production on season 3 of the Emmy-winning anthology series The White Lotus. Do we have any fans here? And is visiting us amidst her work on production of season 3 of The Gilded Age right now. As we saw, she portrays Bertha Russell. The series has since been nominated for a Screen Actors Guild Award for Outstanding Performance by an Ensemble in a Drama Series, and next weekend, Carrie will be attending the Emmys as she's a nominee for Best Actor for her work in The Gilded Age. Her work can also be seen in Gone Girl opposite Ben Affleck, Rosamund Pike, and Neil Patrick Harris, in Matt Ruskin's Boston Strangler, Ghostbusters Afterlife, and The Nest, also The Avengers. And in television, she starred as Vera Walker in the 2nd season of the limited drama series The Sinner. She made history by winning the first ever double TCA award for individual achievement in drama for her brilliant work in both HBO's The Leftovers and FX's anthology series Fargo. Yeah, both fantastic. She has many, many stage credits, and outside of her theater work with Steppenwolf, Carrie most recently portrayed the character in Amy Herzog's world premiere drama, Mary Jane, at the New York Theater Workshop. She currently resides in New York with her husband and creative collaborator. Oh, I'm so sorry, I should mention too, obviously, she's an alum of Mount Union. We've got Mount Union in the house here tonight, right? And received her MFA in acting from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She currently resides in New York with her husband and creative collaborator, Tracy Letts, up for an Emmy nomination tonight as well. Let's wish him well. And her two darling children, my niece and nephew. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome Kasia, Brian, and Carrie to the stage.
Can Kasia see us?
Yes.
Oh, good. Hi, Kasia.
Again.
Congratulations. And I hope you win.
Thank you.
You're wearing my favorite shirt.
The pirate.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming out today. I'm Brian Centrone, as Alex so lovingly introduced us. It's really a pleasure to be here with Kasia, who is zooming in from LA because she is also nominated for an Emmy tonight for her outstanding costumes for the Gilded Age. So a really big thank you for her, because I know she's in the middle of getting ready for the award ceremony, so for taking the time to do this.
Thank you.
Of course, for Carrie, who is not with her husband tonight. She's here with you instead. But we wish him luck, and we want to congratulate you on your Emmy nomination.
Thank you very much.
So we're really excited. So I think we should get started, and I'm told I could just press this button, and we're going to see if that works. Does it work? No. It doesn't. Wait, there we go. All right, everyone, do you remember this dress? So this is the season 2 finale dress. It's currently on display at the Massillon Museum. Thanks in part for Kasia and the team at HBO for making that happen, as well as Carrie. So I want to start a little bit with the actual discussion of the inspiration for this dress, because this is based on a real garment, an existing garment, as many of the garments that you've created are. So I think we have an image of that for everyone. There it is. That is the Worth dress. So Kasia, I'm going to start with you telling us how, as a designer, do you, what that was, how do you sort of tell story through costume? When you're given a script, when it's like, okay, this is the character, this is the plot, how do you decide to build those costumes to, in part, tell that story?
The process for a project like Gilded Age is quite fascinating, because on one hand we are very much faithful to the framework of the period, faithful to the story on the page. At the same time, we're making a movie, we're making entertainment. So there is this twist, a little bit of a twist of the historical reality as needed for our material that we are representing. Gilded Age is based on real characters, inspired by real events, but at the same time creates its own vocabulary and its own language for the production. So it all started from, of course, the page, from the material written by Julian Fellows, and from big discussion with Michael Engler of how we're going to approach this material. And we knew that it's extraordinarily important to create the excitement of the period, that we all have to feel the incredible excitement that happened in this period. Every time the ladies of the society presented themselves at the events on the street, it was like an endless fashion show that was happening on the streets and in the rooms of those extraordinary events. At the same time, it's my responsibility to create the world where the contrasts are highlighted, where the street looks like the street when the events have the highlight of the most incredible moments of the glamour. And I dive into the historical research. We have a library of about 40,000 images of historical references, and then pull from that material pieces that are appropriate for our characters, for the story, and figure out the best of for the period, and then manipulate the colors, manipulate some of the references for the needs of the production.
And I think that's really sort of important to tell us, because I think people think that when you're doing period work that you have to be period accurate, right? And there's some people on Twitter, well, I guess X, who threads about like, oh, this is inauthentic or that is inauthentic. But
Yeah.
there's something that to be said about understanding that you have to sort of make the costumes sort of your own, right? And you have to be able to adjust them to adapt to the story you're telling, to your budget, to your fabrication, but staying true to it, but then also being able to make it your own because you're a designer, right? And it's your vision and you're helping to tell the story. But for Carrie wearing those, how does that help you tell that story too, right? Kasia is creating them to tell part of that story, and then you as the actress in those garments, how do they help you to tell that story when you're in those clothes?
Well, the best, I come from the theater, of course, and Kasia knows that in the theater, all the artists, it's incredibly collaborative. And I rely on a costume designer, for example, to elucidate something about character for me. Sometimes in TV and film, when it's more contemporary, you're not having that conversation because they're just throwing you in a pair of pants. Well, this is much more complex than that. And one of the things that Kasia was speaking about, audiences have seen this period depicted before. So you have certain expectations. So Kasia has a responsibility to make Bertha feel more modern and make her feel like she's more forward thinking. And so that means that she's actually pushing the period a little bit from a design perspective. And it's important for a contemporary audience to have that experience because you guys can feel who's doing that and who's kind of stuck in the older world. One of the things I love that Michael Engler says about Kasia is when you go into their costume storage area, you can tell whose costumes belong to which character just by looking. Like you can see the palette or the construction and you know like that's Ada's rack, that's Bertha Russell's rack, because Kasia's work has been so specific and so fine. And Bertha's fun to play because some of the actors have just one costume fabricator, but I'm actually working with several different makers of the dresses. People were covetous of these very distinguished labels in Paris. The rich women would go to Paris and there would be one dressmaker that was really de rigueur and everybody would be going to that person. But so it's important for Bertha to have this like range of different fabricators. So I get to have fittings with all the different makers that we work with, including a new Italian house we're working with this year. But the most fun is to go into the room to do the fitting, and you put on the basic costume, and then Kasia comes in with her vision board and the image that inspired it from history, and then maybe an animal that she's working with, or a building. Some of Bertha's costumes in season 1 were about being steely and being part of that kind of steelworker and railroad world. And then she starts to play when we're in the room, very seriously. And there's trim, and there are layers, and there's getting the bustle just right. And it's like, do we need more on the bustle, less on the bustle? And the asymmetry that we're always working with Bertha. And so I get to watch Kasia finish that process while the costume's on my body. And frankly, when you're doing period work, that you're 75% of the way. Now you just have to put on your wig and say the lines, and as long as you don't mess those up, you're actually telling the story, because of the support. And, we talk a lot about the way Bertha walks. It was very important in that period to sort of glide along the floor. And Bertha doesn't do that. Bertha has a bit of a sachet. So Kasia and I are always, doing the walk, after we try a dress on just to see how it's going to fit on Bertha before she gets on camera.
Well, there we have an image of you in action, walking with your very attractive co-star. Let's give it up for Morgan Spencer. Now, as a menswear historian, I have to say I can't do anything without bringing up menswear because it does get ignored a lot. But Kasia has been able to include all kinds of aspects of menswear in this series. Evening wear, day wear, leisure wear, active wear, sportswear, which is really incredible because you don't always see it. But I would like to know, because I think something that we don't think about is when designing menswear, to the average person, it all sort of looks the same, because menswear hasn't changed that dramatically in a long time. But just sort of more seasoned eye, you sort of see the sort of little tweaks and changes. But how does that sort of differ then, having to design the women's wear? How do you sort of find sort of those characteristics for male characters when obviously for women's wear it's a little bit easier to do that because you can use bolder colors or sort of patterns. With the men's wear, particularly in the period, you have to sort of stick to these more traditional social standards. So as a designer, how are you able to do that and sort of be able to feel like you're creating characters for the males while giving them identity in something that's so uniform?
Menswear in that particular period is very specific. It almost creates background for the glamour of the ladies. And we were very faithful to that idea of presenting the men with this very classic shapes, classic approach within that period. We know that throughout history, there's so many other periods where the men's wear overpowers women's wear. That is not the chapter that we are studying. This is also, I think this is an appropriate moment to mention all the exquisite makers that we are working with and all the people who are bringing their endless amount of expertise and to the creation, because menswear is all about tailoring. To deliver this extraordinary level of precision and simple elegance, you require expertise of several people who can execute it, because finding that's a very dying art. There's not that many people who can construct the menswear in this classic, beautifully tailored shapes. And we were very lucky to find the best makers in the world to create it. And there was the design team and highly contributed with all of their expertise and details in creating those looks for men. And appearingly is quite simple, but it's actually extraordinary difficult to create menswear that fits as effortlessly as it fits here. So that was a area where we actually pay a lot of attention and study the construction in quite an extraordinary detail.
Well, I think you did it beautifully. I think it shows in the show. Menswear tailoring is such an art, and to get it right is really challenging, and you have done it wonderfully. So congratulations to you and your team for doing that, because you've really highlighted men in a significant way. And as a menswear historian, I applaud you for that. Thank you.
Thank you. It's definitely a tribute to my extraordinary design team that participates. We are very lucky to have a large group of team that creates that functions their daily operations, and I have a bunch of designers who are contributing daily to the process. I'm just lucky to be in charge of that extraordinary talented team.
So I want to highlight, so these are an image of the Carrie's costumes that are currently on display at the museum. And really in many ways, the costumes influence the exhibition design. After sort of watching episodes of season 2 of The Gilded Age, I would text Alex and I was like, you know what we need to do for the exhibition? We need an opera box. We need an opera box. And that really helped to inform us. So in many ways, Kasia, your original costume designs were sort of inspiration for how I shaped the exhibition and what sections I wanted to include. Because when we knew we were being able to get them, I said, this is how we have to highlight them, this is how we have to showcase them, because they're really representative in so many ways of what life in the Gilded Age was, particularly entertainment. And we're all in this gorgeous theater, even though this was built in the 1920s, opera houses went up all around in the 19th century, and it was a hub of entertainment. And that's what sort of people of that wealthy class did, right? They went to the opera house for all kinds of things, and they sort of went out for evenings. And so a lot of thinking, goes into this idea of how do you perform in spaces, right? And so when you're designing for the show, one of the things to think about is, okay, where is the scene taking place? Right, because in the 19th century, a woman had an outfit for every occasion and every place, as did men. So one of the things, Kasia, when you're thinking about in terms of setting and Carrie for when you're having to perform in them, how much is that spatial awareness going, okay, this is an evening scene, it has to be this type of dress. This is when you're going to confront Lady Astor, right? What kind of dress do you create to sort of go, she's just paying a friendly visit, right, to Lady Astor, but it's gotta be, it's got to be powerful. So how do you go about in sort of those sort of design challenges, and then when you're in those, sort of going, okay, this is the scene I'm performing, this is the space I'm performing in?
Kasia, you're so integral to making those decisions. Why don't you speak about it first?
As Carrie mentioned, it's a collaboration. We are like this highly interdependent body of influences. I keep running. I'm on the same floor as Bob Shaw, the incredible designer, production designer of our show. And the moment when we get a scene, I run to Bob's office and I was like, what are you guys doing? What are the colors? What are we going to be seeing? That conversation happens nonstop. We communicate all the time with the directors of photography of how we're going to see it, what is going to be lighting, what is the level of darkness or lightness that we're going to see the scene, and then collaborate with actors. And as Carrie mentioned, the way she presents those dresses, my design part is half of the process. The way Carrie walks in those costumes and presents them, there is that immediate transformation that happens within the persona that she brings to the costume. And by now, I mean, we're lucky to be working on season 3 where we know those elements. We know each other. I know how Carrie is going to pull it off. I know how she's going to walk into the space. And then, so it's my responsibility is to connect all those elements. And for example, with the final dress for the opera, I based that dress on a very famous iron dress that existed in white and black, in pinks, and in blues. And I decided to use this aqua color because I knew that that's going to be the strongest color within the red theater. And we needed that moment for Bertha to be standing out apart from everybody else in the whole opera. That was her moment, that was her winning moment. And I felt that the color has to be center of that attention. So it was stretching the historical rules, nevertheless, using a very potent historical image. I play with that idea throughout the show. I use some of the references as direct quotes to the historical dresses. In some cases, I take pieces of historical dresses and combine them together, just the way we are creating the stories of taking pieces of elements. But there is a framework that we cannot break. It always has to stay within the silhouette of the period, within the social standards of the period that have to be obeyed. Otherwise, my head would be chopped off. I think that's fair to say.
We fight over sleeves. I remember, Kasia, the first time when we shot the opening, when it was the first time I ever saw the set of the Russell House. I don't know if you have been to the houses in Newport. Certainly some of you have seen the existing mansions that still exist in Cleveland. I grew up going to Stan Hewitt Hall, with school. Beautiful place. I walked into the lobby of the Russell House, the foyer, and I was like, whoa. Like, there's nothing that exists that's as big. And it looks like Grand Central Station. And I was like, oh, I have to fill this space. And in that first opening scene of season 1, I am watching them, bring all this stuff in from Europe. We've been cannibalizing, broke mansions all over Europe to get these pieces, which is what those rich people did. And the chandelier was, the chandelier was almost the size of this stage. And they're like, so you're gonna walk under the chandelier while they're cranking it up. And I was like, oh, okay. And then you walk into this room where there's that giant portrait of Bertha on the wall. And you had put me in, it was a silver traveling suit, and we had put these pom-poms all over it. And I was like, that's a lot of pom-poms. Do you think it's too much? Kasia, it's too much, And then this hat, this like massive, swooping hat. And I just thought, I don't know if I can fill this dress. But then, you walk into that space and you're like, you have to wear something that audacious in that space or you would disappear because of what Bob is doing. Production design's the only Emmy we have so far because he's so brilliant at it. And then, you realize the actual physical size of a space like that. And then it's like, okay, now I see what everyone is doing. And then it's my job to try to fill that up truthfully. And sometimes I'm successful at that.
I think most times you're successful at that.
It's a very fine line, Brian. It's a very fine line. Thank you, very kindly, thank you.
I think we can all attest that Bertha Russell knows how to fill a space.
Well,
Yes.
She teaches me a lot.
Yes. She teaches us all a lot. I feel like she's an inspiration for so many of us. So I want to talk about another dress that was the sort of point of inspiration that goes all the way back to season 1. And this is a Worth wedding dress that was designed for Alice Wade Everett, who's from the Wade family in Cleveland, and this resides at the Western Reserve Historical Society under the care of Patricia Edmondson, who's here tonight. And I want to give her a special thank you because she let me into her storage unit and have a field day picking out costumes and lending them to us for the show. And this is one of them because when we started the exhibition planning a year ago, this dress came up and said, oh, you know, this was the dress we used for the inspiration for 2 dresses that were created for Kelly O'Hara's character of Aurora Fane in season 1. This yellow-greenish dress, which takes some of the sleeve influence, and this blue dress, wait, is it coming? I have to press it again. Can we find it? Come on. There it is. This wonderful blue dress as well. And so we have, I think, a picture of them all in line in the exhibition. There they are, all lined up in conversation with each other. And so I mean, so one of the hardest things I had to do as the curator was write a panel that talked about how Kasia was able to take the original dress and take the pieces from it and reinterpret them for 2 different dresses. And I spent, I can tell you hours looking at these dresses in detail and going, where did this come from? And oh, this is where she did this, and she's extended this line. And so if anyone actually takes the time to read that, that's hours of work and maybe some hair pulling because it was so detailed, so extensive. But can you talk a little bit about that specific process? Because you talked a little bit about earlier about, you know, sort of creating from these periods. But this is a very special gown. And the fact that you were able to take those elements and sort of manipulate them and turn them into dresses, I think is something that's really unique. And so can you tell us a little bit about how you decided what element would go where and sort of how you would extend them so they brought Aurora Fane's character to life?
In the first season, I think that one of the priorities, other than creating this whole world, discovering the whole world of Gilded Age and finding the tone for the period, was also finding characters and finding elements that fit from each of the historical research gowns that fit each character. And Aurora Fane had this very specific vocabulary that we were exploring, which was her character was making the choices that were the most ornamented, the most detailed, the most decorated, the most influenced by ornamentation. I think that was what drove my interest towards that dress. And I knew I was breaking a whole bunch of rules, and I was wondering who is going to discover breaking of the rules. So thank you for acknowledging it, because this was a wedding dress. Our understanding of wedding dresses decades later is completely different. We know what is the expectation of the wedding dress in today's world. And this is where that prism of history and perspective, that's where I felt I had this moment of exploration of what it means to be faithful to the history and what does it mean to be faithful to the mind, contemporary mind that is looking at the history. To the mind, we know what were the 50s. We know who was Christian Dior. We know who was John Galliano. We know what was the minimalism of the early 2000s. We have all those fashion perspectives in our heads. We have different expectations of what things are. So I felt like I had that freedom of adjusting the period through the prism of contemporary mind and taking elements of the historical dress and enjoying and celebrating the elements of historical dress in slightly different perspective and addressing it. I felt that as long as it's deeply rooted in the history, as long as each character is deeply rooted in the character, that my responsibility is to create the differences of the characters and find language for each of the characters. We all, as humans, are drawn to graphic dimension in the world. Some of us love things that are super simple. Some of us like things that are highly ornamented. And then there's the influence of society and the standards of current fashions. That's what creates character. That's what my responsibility is, to create so many characters that are different from each other. So I think that I just described how the root of the creating of the character and the influence of the dress happened. And then, of course, there's a different perspective, because I knew that the people who will be looking at it from the historical perspective might be quite perplexed of why I was using this wedding dress in that context. But I think I stayed very faithful in creating Aurora Fane character of feminine ornamentation, and continue this until today.
Well, you certainly did a wonderful job with it. I mean, they're iconic pieces. This yellow-green one that's on I guess, the right of your screen. This was my friend Michael's favorite dress. He thinks it's the best dress in the series. He has a video of it walking from behind because the fringe shakes. And he shows it to me all the time, and he's like, please get that dress for the show. Please get that dress for the show. And I did, because that's what friends are for. And because it's really gorgeous. When I opened the box, when HBO sent the boxes and we opened them up, and I was like, oh my God, these dresses are stunning. And Carrie saw them on display for the first time last night, and she's like, oh, I've got to send this to Kelly. What's that like to sort of see these dresses that you've acted with or acted in sort of on display in a museum? These are the first time these costumes have ever been on display, and so that's a really amazing thing. So what was that like for you?
Well, I specifically remember that one because I remember falling into Kelly's blue eyes. I mean, she's just mesmerizing. She's gorgeous, and then I was like, oh my gosh, and that dress is the exact color of Kelly's eyes. I mean, they change according, but the palette they put her in is so striking. I feel that she always stands out in a room. And I just, gosh, I mean, I just adore her. She's such an extraordinary talent in the theater. And I feel intimidated by those people because I cannot walk and sing at the same time. Yeah. So that's actual talent. My husband and I always say, those people are actually talented. And we do Gilded Age the musical, I'll be replaced. So I'm a little starstruck by them because I just think what they do is amazing. And she's from Oklahoma, you know? Right. She's kind of our people. She's very down to earth. And so it's wild to see that transformation, you know, someone who's so accessible then become this very ornamented woman. And Kelly also, you know, she appreciates, you know, she's always going to dress up for the occasion. And so it does suit her in a way. And I know she appreciates the detail. And that Eric Winterling builds her dresses, one of our makers, makes a lot of sense.
Well, she pulls them off, and it was really, I mean, it was wonderful to see them and dress them. The details of them were extraordinary, and it was like, these are no joke. These are no joke. So if you haven't gone to see them, please, you have until October 13th, because they're extraordinary in person, and some people come, they don't know which one is the original and which one is the costume. They are that brilliantly designed. I want to talk about another costume, if I can get the clicker to work again, because it is, there it is. This is, I have to say, I think one of my favorite costumes in the series. This is extraordinary. I want to know first, now Carrie, you posted this. You posted this on your social media about your co-star.
Thaisa Farmiga.
Yes, practicing in this gown. But what I want to know, and what I think is really inspiring about the work that you and your team do, Kasia, is the fact that you're able to bring color and texture and volume to the series, and about being able to do that for the screen. Because I think what people don't necessarily realize is that when you're designing costume for screen, right, it's very different. Right? It's very different from stage to screen, isn't it? Because the camera has to pick it up. And so when designing this dress in particular, how did you think, okay, Gladys is about to sort of go to this ball. We know that her mother may have sold her off into marriage, right?
She doesn't know what's good for her.
Mama knows best.
I have no regrets.
No regrets. No, because you won the war. So in creating this dress, which I absolutely love, what did you say, okay, this is why I need to make it so big, so I need to make it a statement. What was it about this scene in particular, and putting Gladys in this gown that was like, this has to go hard?
That's the drama of the finale. Like I think in this particular Gilded Age project, we are all so lucky and so privileged to be surrounded by people who come from theater, as Carrie mentioned. I started from fashion and theater, and I think that the training in theater contributed to this layers of how we have to approach this project. This project is not just TV series. It's a project that is layered with layers and layers of demand, of using a brain as a person who has understanding of what spectacle is, what theater is, what is the entrance, theatrical entrance. This moment is very theatrical. That whole ending is very theatrical. So I think that it was some training from theater that stirred up my need for color, for the bigness. And then I dove into the historical research and found there are dresses with the size of the sleeve. That particular dress that it was based on, we see only the photograph, and I have no idea what was the color, but because it was a black and white color photograph, and most likely it was a pale dress. But at the same time, there was so much research of that period of dresses that were made in extraordinary colorful palettes. That was the time of invention of dyes, artificial dyes. So not only that period was full of natural dyes, but it was also full of artificial dyes. And early on, Michael Engler and me were so attracted to paintings of that period, that's where we drew the color inspiration from. There was so much vivid color, so I felt it was my responsibility to represent color in the process of designing for Gilded Age. And knowing that we have the staircase with the red carpets, and then knowing that the ladies are going to be entering the theater, which is bright red, knowing that also I need to create a difference between the new opera and the old opera. That was the decision of going towards color for Bertha's world and her opera versus using the very toned down pale colors for the old guard. There was also an element of practicality that as a designer of the show, I need to know how to maneuver color and manipulate color to deliver the most for the budgets that we have. So you strategize continuously how to use color and how to use shape for the moments that matter the most. And that was for sure the moment of grand finale that was asking for bigness and brightness and spectacle.
Well, you certainly delivered it. And, I was showing Carrie pictures yesterday at the exhibition. There, we have photos of women in ginormous sleeves. And I always tell people, it's like, everyone thinks that, the history of the period was like, oh, everything is in black and white, because all we see is sepia-colored photos or black and white photos. But we know from existing garments that they were all kinds of colors. I mean, the aniline dyes really made people go wild, and there are pieces in the show that have gorgeous purples. There's a pair of purple boots in there, which are almost the same color as Goddess's gown. So the reality is there could have been a dress this color that walked. And that is sort of the beauty of sort of doing the historical research and sort of pulling into sort of costume collections. But for Carrie, I want to know the idea of practicing. You talked about getting the walk down. But how much you and your co-stars have to practice? Because wearing those pieces, even the menswear, right, those tailored suits, they're fit very differently than the sort of the clothes we wear today. So how much practicing kind of goes into adjusting to how you stand and move and sit in those period clothing?
Well, I mean, look at that staircase. Right. And you have to, when you're working on a stair, you have to pretend like it's your house. Like, you don't look at the stairs in your own house, right? Because they're your stairs. And so you really have to own your stairs. But then you have to drag that thing behind you and not fall on your face. I think there was one cape, Kasia, the opera cape from season 1. Didn't it weigh like 15 pounds or something, the beading on it? I mean, probably. I was choked to death every time I exited. They had to take it off every time because it was so heavy to just like swan out the door and down the stairs. You're actually dragging like 10 pounds with your neck. So there are very specific challenges
And
that come along with
shoulders.
each garment. And shoulders, yeah. There was a choker I wore. It looked like I had been strangled when I took it off. Because you wear it, we work 14 to 16 hours a day. So every garment has its own challenge. They're all different. And I'm telling you, the corset ends up being the least of your worries. It's really like, because the wigs are quite large, and sometimes they have to add hair and add, like little chignon little netting baubles to fit the hats, because the hats are so much larger than the hair would actually be. So we're carrying around loads of extra hair and sneaky little puff balls under there. They're always like, can we take the hat off in the shot? We're like, no, you cannot. You don't want to see what's under there. And so, so it's just everything, every dress is different, really. So it's fun.
It really is, and sort of I think what people don't always also realize is that everything that's underneath it that helps build the dress, and sort of when HBO sent the dresses over, they also sent everything that Carrie and Kelly O'Hara wore under the dresses, which were petticoats and pads and hoops. And I did tell Carrie the other day, I said, our undercoats were so heavy it broke the mannequin. It literally just pulled the entire waist down. And I was like,
I've gotten used to it, I guess.
Just gotten used to it. But the fabrics were, they were wonderful things, but it's like layers and layers to get the fullness and volume of those dresses. And it was hysterical.
I wear hip pads. I
Yes.
wear fake hips. Because my hips aren't dramatic enough for Kasia.
Listen, it works. It works, and I dressed those hip pads, and we were just standing there dressing it, and all of a sudden we were looking at going, something is not right, and it's slowly sinking like the Titanic. And we're like, it's broken the mannequin. It's like, how does Carrie do this?
Strong, you have to be very strong.
Very strong thighs. Well, that's from having 2 kids, right?
Yeah, it doesn't hurt.
No. So, speaking of having kids...
I ate a rack of ribs that day for lunch.
Now, you were famously pregnant during the filming of season 1. And you've posted this. This is you shared this on social media. And so what I want to know from both you and Kasia is about how did Carrie's pregnancy reshape or reinform how you dressed her?
A lot of capes.
You had to hide, right? And I think Carrie you were telling me that because the scenes are filmed out of order, there were times where you were in a garment where you were not pregnant yet.
This dress I wore the first, I think, 2 weeks of shooting. I had a lovely waistline in that shot, and then we shot it the last 2 weeks of shooting. So I think I told them about my pregnancy 5 weeks into the season. I think it was 5 weeks in.
Way to disclose,
or maybe it was
Carrie.
even less.
Way to disclose.
Yeah, it was. We were sure of the timeline, and then I was 8 months pregnant when we wrapped. So Kasia, what were the magical tricks you employed to make my dresses expand?
Carrie, because she is the most fun collaborator in the whole operation. Carrie has an endless amount of great humor, and she's worth every effort. We had so much fun hiding the pregnancy that it was a continuous reconstruction of all the garments. And it involved our genius makers and Kathy Marshall, who at that time dealt with reconstructing Carrie's corsets, because we're like, I've never dealt with corsets and pregnancy. And I was like, I have no idea what the corset is going to do to the baby. My intuition is telling me that it's completely wrong. So we were asking for reconstruction of the corsets, and Kathy was constructing corsets that were just avoiding the belly region. We were telling Carrie, it was like, tell us what is okay, what is
imagine
not
that
okay.
conversation with your OB. You're like, so, how long do you think I can wear a corset before it gets dangerous? And they're like, what? I don't know how to answer that question.
No, none of us knew how to answer those questions. And we had some experience of pregnancy on film, but this particular one was engineering, and we treated it with so much humor and so much fun, but I knew that I have to redesign all the shapes for Carrie and try to create waistline somehow, and using darker shades on the sides and creating a lot of what we called it fluff in the front. That was a technical term, fluff to hide the baby. Lots of capes with fringes, moving fringes, so ideally the fringe moved whenever Carrie was moving. There was also a lot of engineering that happened during filming, which is using umbrellas and trunks and props and hiding Carrie's belly behind different scenes. So it was a collaboration. That particular dress, the red dress, was completely recut. There was, we were adding panels, we are opening the lacing in the corsets in the back, and I think we hit it pretty successfally.
Yeah, I used the fan when I stood up. If you watch that scene, I stand up and I open the fan like this, sideways, and I walk out of the room. And the director saw me, a female director, and she goes, oh no, how are we going to do this? And she just shot the scene like across the side of my face, basically. Terrifying.
I mean, I think it was very successfully done.
Yeah.
And yesterday there's a giant fan in the exhibition if you go see it. And Carrie's like, we could have used that to hide the baby bump.
Yeah, it's a beautiful fan. It's stunning.
Gorgeous, isn't it?
Kasia, you should see this fan. It's so pretty.
She took a picture. She'll send it to you. They opened it up for me in storage and went, it's in the show. Let's move on. No, it's going in. And so I think we have one more photo. Speaking of corsets, you also shared this to social media, and social media went nuts about this, and I was in many threads on this image because everyone wants to know what's going on in it. What are the layers that are happening? Because we see the corset was just kind of translucent, but it seems like
that's my stretch corset. That was one of the first ones we wore during the pregnancy because it actually expanded because it was netting. So I actually got to wear that one for quite a while I was getting bigger.
But what's under it? Because you seem like you have two other layers. There's a black layer and then there's a lacy layer.
That might be my mic pack, actually.
Right.
And then we wear a camisole under there. And then I probably had my hip pads in, though toward the end I didn't really need them as much. And then, yeah, that's my petticoat, and there would have been a bustle underneath that. We call it the lobster because it's cinched like a lobster tail, but it starts with a C. The actual term is Italian or something. I can't remember the term. And then, I probably still have my heels on because we don't have a lot of time to eat. As you can see, I'm eating like someone's about to take it away from me. Because they are. They're like, it's time to go. And we get about a half an hour lunch break. So sometimes you don't have time to relax. You're just trying to stuff your face and take a nap. But, and I have my headpiece in and the wig on. You can't really lay down often in those headpieces. Sometimes they have to take the top of the carriage off because my hats are too big. I'd have to be like this. And they're like, fly off the top like a Porsche. Yeah, it's mostly corset and bustle and petticoat is what we usually have.
Was the pizza good?
It was, I don't remember. It was fine. It was fuel. I think it was probably like midnight at that point. Usually pizza comes late when everyone's getting really hangry because we've been there 14 hours.
Do the undergarments sort of help you? Because we know that traditionally they help support the costumes, right? They're built to sort of support the costumes. Everyone in the period wore them. So do they help you when you sort of get into it to sort of feel like, okay, because they're so heavy, the costumes. A lot of them, the fabrication is like...
Yeah,
really
it
heavy.
actually can be very supportive. The corset can support some of the hips, because oftentimes those skirts can be quite replete, and they can pull down on your hips, and so it's always good to have a corset that goes over the hip and below. It's kind of tricky to find the right spot, but you want that because if it's sitting on your hip bones... I had one dress that I was in a short corset, and it was sitting on my hip bones, right? And I couldn't walk. I was holding on to Nathan Lane for dear life because I was being pulled backwards. And I think some major artery was being cut off, occluded. And Kasia and her team actually came into set that day. We were doing a night shoot, so it was about 2 a.m. And they just started removing layers out of the bustle and they got me along, and I changed corsets to put on a longer hip corset so I would have some support. And then it got sort of marginally better from there. But they're always there to help us.
That dress was an experiment that went wrong. That we used new fabric, and I think both the makers, our whole design team, we underestimated the weight of the fabric, and we needed to print the new pattern on the dress, and we decided to use a new fabric that we haven't used previously because we needed sheen and something that will print really well, and it was underestimated. None of us felt how heavy the bustle was. And Carrie never, ever complains, despite the chokers that leave her bruised and the hats that weigh more than normal human can carry on their heads. And when Carrie said, I cannot walk in, that we knew it was serious. We knew because she never, ever complained once throughout the pregnancy and all the other challenges that we were putting her through. So we all got very alarmed of what was happening and realized that the bustle was extraordinarily heavy and was just like past that point of what is wearable and what was not wearable. And we started cutting out layers and recreating the bustle on the spot. And the next morning, I think we took it back to our workshop and recut the whole bustle and eliminated probably about 60 pounds of the fabrics.
That's amazing. That is amazing. Thank God you complained.
Yeah, if you save it and you only complain sometimes, then everybody rushes to your aid. It's the boy
Then
who
you get
cried
their
wolf,
attention.
right?
Right. Now, I think it's important, though, because you have to feel comfortable in your costume. If it's not working for you, you can't perform. And
Yeah, because there's a fine line between what's informative and then what's an obstruction. You
Right.
know?
And so we don't have any images, but recently there's been tons of social media posts from people showing up on set when you were up in the Capital Region in Troy, just filming on their cell phones of Kasia, massive amounts of extras dressed, moving from building to building, buses waiting on lines. So can you tell us a little bit about what to expect from the costume in season 3, and how do you manage that sort of volume that you need to put on the Gilded Age? Because it's not just the main stars of the show. I mean, there are hundreds of extras that you have to costume in period clothing. So you and your team, how do you manage to sort of outfit everyone, and then what should we look forward to? What should we be expecting in season 3?
I think what I can say, what we can expect is like further exploration of wild extravaganza of the period and quite interesting events that we had to create. But I think that that's all what I can tell about the story. But it is a tribute to my phenomenal team, the design team, the team of costumers, the team of wardrobe supervisors, the makers, and just this giant planning that goes into creating images that end up on the screen. We have thousands of extras. It's months of planning, months of fittings. There is, I always say, it's like this giant baking factory that is planning of movements, of movements of trucks between places. In season 2, I think that there were 22 trucks, big giant trucks of costumes that were moving between New York and Troy and Newport. It's an enormous operation. There's a lot of us. It's like a beehive. It's pretty much the same team through the 3 seasons. We by now have this shorthand of figuring out what needs to happen by what date, but it's weeks and weeks of preparation of fitting this volume of extras and sourcing costumes, renting costumes, building costumes, altering costumes, fitting costumes, and then putting them on stage. Sometimes our costumers on a big day, like what you mentioned that was happening upstate New York, our costumers team started at 2 a.m. Dressing people in the undercoats and the petticoats and corsets and putting layers, and then the extras were going through hair and makeup, and we were ready to start filming at about 9 o'clock. So it's hours and hours and hours of preparation. It's quite extraordinary when you step back and look at it. Like on today, like we are very lucky that this cast and the producers and creators brought us to this moment of the Emmy nomination, because it's such an acknowledgement of this efforts of this extraordinary group of people that I'm so happy to represent, because it's truly a giant group effort to be able to put those huge scenes on the screen.
Well, it's
Can I
certainly
ask her a question
well-deserved.
about that?
Yeah, of course.
What percentage of the first season's costumes for the extras did you build? Did you build all of the costumes in season 1 for extras?
We built majority of the female costumes. Those stocks did not exist. We very quickly realized that that period does not exist in costume rentals. We build with collaboration of a lot of costume rentals in Europe and the United States. We built majority of the female costumes for the production. We built several costumes of the menswear. Menswear was a little bit more generous in existing stocks, but barely. Like we could rent a bunch of tails, but it was a small percentage of what existed. And we kept building and building the costumes for the second season and for the third season. So majority of the stuff that you see on the screen has been built by our production.
I have to say, Kasia, it's extraordinary. You'll be, sometimes we're fake talking with the extras in the background, and you'll just start staring at a ribbon, a contrasting velvet-colored ribbon and a brooch, and the level of detail that goes into the background costuming is astonishing. We're always, when we have a big event, like a big ball, or we're so excited to see how everyone is dressed, because there's just as much love and care taken with those hundreds and thousands of people as there is with us. And so it's always, we always marvel at how extraordinary the costume department is whenever we're on set. It's so moving to us.
Well, seeing those social media posts really...
Sorry,
good.
It's moving to us also that there's so many makers that contribute so much, because there is so much expertise that goes into building those costumes. And a lot of the times, we design the garments, but sometimes there's this extra element that comes from the makers who love, all of a sudden I see this extra drape or extra ribbon added, because there's so many people that put love into construction of those costumes. I think that it's such a dying art, the historical costume, that I think that we, as one of the huge privileges of Gilded Age, is that we provided so much work for makers in the United States and abroad, for the creators of those historical costumes. We also helped a lot of costume houses during the pandemic, because during the pandemic, theater stopped existing and a lot of costume houses were threatened to survive. And I think that Gilded Age, we kept going with the builds, and I think that make us feel so connected to the community of makers, and we sure hope that we can further continue those collaborations and make sure that our embroiderers, that our printers, that our costume makers, that the fabric suppliers, that there is a lot of work for them to continue existence, because we would be non-existent without them.
Well, I think it definitely shows, and if you see those social media posts, if you haven't seen them, check them out, because it shows the extraordinary level of detail, even on the extras, and it's so impressive. And so that's why your Emmy nomination is so deserved. And you're very right, we have to keep those workers alive. We've got to keep those arts and crafts alive, because without them, really there will be nothing.
And there are so many jobs, and we're also fighting for incentives in Ohio, because it's tremendous infrastructure. There's a lot of commerce to be had in a state like this, where you have all these amazing historical buildings. Mm-hmm. We have some things filming here, but it's kind of an extraordinary industry, and I'm hopeful that Ohio will continue opening the door, because there's just a lot of jobs.
Yeah. So I think we have. So I think we have some time for audience Q&A, and we have mics at the ends of the row. So if you want to try and ask a question, if you sort of line up, get in line, queue up like the extras in those videos.
We have a hot mic over here. Go ahead. That was quick.
You're my favorite character on the Gilded Age, and I love you in Ghostbusters. What part, or how refreshing is it to be a part of a power couple with Mr. Russell?
Well, that's the best writing in the show. It's the fact that their marriage is rather unexpected. Mm-hmm. When the thing happens with Turner in season 1, Bertha's not mad because she thought he cheated on her. She's mad because he didn't tell her the truth, because they operate at full disclosure. And so I think it's one of the signs of just how smart Julian Fellows is about that stuff. He's really written an amazing marriage, and I love Morgan. He's great. We're great friends, and I adore him.
I can't wait to see it.
And he's very hot.
I love you.
We all have crushes on Morgan.
Should we go to this man at the end here?
Hi, how are you?
Great.
Quick, two questions, kind of short. First of all, what is it like participating in period pieces from a standpoint? I loved you in The Post. Yeah. I loved you. I love this show. This brings me to the TV. Okay. My wife will want to watch what's going on behind the scenes, with the families and all the interaction. But I like the the Brooklyn Bridge. So what is it for you to be at with the post to appreciate the history that you're showing.
Well, that's one of the great privileges of being an actor, because you're always being invited into something new. And so it really, if you're a curious person, it's the most extraordinary life, because yes, you get to then read about the Washington Post and how that all came to be. I love to revisit Henry James and Edith Wharton when I'm working on these shows, and learning things like the etiquette of the period, or how they dressed and why. And so for someone like me, who I am rather insatiable, it's the most wonderful job in the world. So it's an invitation, just like it is for someone watching it.
Right. My next question, and this is probably asking a little bit too much, but if you can, will Mrs. Russell break bread in the Van Ryn home in the coming seasons?
You want to see me and Christine?
Well,
I know.
with the change of leadership across the street, we're just
interesting.
because my wife and I, since you have thousands of
Right.
extras, we would love to be on the street to watch that actually happen.
I hope you understand that you're signing up for a 16-hour day outside, sir.
I can stand there
Okay.
all day to watch.
All right.
To watch Christine Baranski's face when you walk in the door.
I totally agree. I can't say whether that's going to happen, of course, but I also haven't seen 307 and 308 yet, so who knows? We'll see.
Thank you. Go Raiders.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Go
much.
Raiders.
First of all, I can't even believe I'm talking to you. You're just wonderful. But anyway, I have two really quick questions. One is, do you do any filming at all in the Breakers or in Marble House, or is it all sets that look like it?
No, we're in all the mansions. We're in the Elms, we're in the Breakers, and we're in Marble House. And somewhere else, Kasia, do you know where we're going to be? Anyway, several
We're
of those
not
mansions.
sure where we're going to
Okay.
be, but those mansions are
Yeah.
phenomenal. That, as Carrie says,
are.
this is our privilege. We roam around those mansions. We get to know them in tiny little details, every
And we
detail.
break
then
things
we make
inside of
friends
them.
with the caretakers and go to every possible entrance in the mansion. It's amazing.
Yeah, and you can go to Newport now and do the Gilded Age tour, and they'll show you exactly where we filmed things.
Second thing is, if you would like, could you grace us with a couple lines as Bertha?
Oh my gosh. You guys, after I'm done, I have to dump them or there's no room in my brain for the other lines. So you guys know the lines better than me. You know what, I always make fun of myself, and I say this one all the time for my family. What an interesting moment for me to arrive. That's my making fun of myself Bertha voice that I like to do for the people who know me well. When I think I've gone a little too far, But I don't know what else she said. What else does she say?
I don't know, but
I
just
don't either.
anything. We just want to
What do I
see you
say,
in
you
person
guys?
as Bertha.
Oh man, if anybody can think of a line, just shout it out. And we'll get to that, I'm sure. Somebody will think of something. What is it? Busting makes me feel good. A mashup for you.
Thank you so much.
Over here.
How many yards of fabric and how much time did it go into the average dress for the ladies?
So we try to have about 6 weeks for the whole process. So my design has to be completed before the 6 weeks. 6 weeks is from the time when the maker gets the order. It's about 8 to 12 yards for the outer layers and about 6 yards for the underlayers, underskirts, and depends all on trims and sizes of the bustles, but that's the average count of the fabrics. And of course the maker sometimes we don't have those 6 weeks. So, but I think that you really cannot have the dress made in less than 3.5 weeks.
Yes.
Thank you. I am with an all-women's organization that you may know, Alpha Delta Pi.
Yes, I do.
Thank you. I would love for you to talk about this. You said immediately that Bertha Russell is forward-thinking, but she's also a powerful philanthropist. So could you talk about how you have brought your personal perspective and vision into creating this role?
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, she certainly has more resources at her disposal than I have. And, for women of that time, they couldn't be senators or CEOs, and their purview was philanthropy. And of course, the government wasn't providing services, so it fell on these very, very wealthy families who were not paying income tax to provide what they really saw as their legacy, right? It was pretty selfish interest to have an opera house or a museum or something named after you. And so that was really their that was really their only avenue for expressing any kind of ambition or smarts, or that's how they used it. And so I'm even more moved by people like Soroptimists, which my sister-in-law is really a big part of, or these sororities who continue to do good works in the world as you do sort of leave college and become people of means or people of talent, and you're able to apply them. In some ways, the world is demanding more of you than ever. So to carve time out for that is very moving to me. I wish we had, I feel like if we marshaled all the forces of all these very wealthy people in the world, we could solve a lot of problems. And so I'm sort of frustrated with the Bertha Russells of the world as I am by the very rich people we have now, that I think they could be doing so much more. So how much money does a person need? So I don't know. I don't think of Bertha in terms of my own contributions to the world, but I think what mostly influences that for me is that as I become more successful, I guess, as my name is meaningful, I am eager to sort of lend it into places where it can be well used, So hopefully that, if that continues, or they might throw me out of Hollywood, in about 2 to 5 years, you guys. I got about 5 years left, maybe. But hopefully, that's I have more access to that now. So I'm excited to see where it takes me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a few more questions. So we're going to take this one next.
I was wondering where you found Bertha, and also if your process is kind of similar for every role that you do, or if it changes depending on what you're doing.
Well, Kasia was a big part of that. I mean, the costumes were originally started for a different actress, and then I kind of swooped in, and Kasia made some changes. And I can't remember, there was one day where vocally I thought, oh, that's where she sits very low, because she would like to be in rooms with powerful men, and we give up our power when our voices aren't rooted in our bodies. And I think Bertha is somebody who maybe, I realize she probably inherently understands those things, even if they're not conscious. So she knows how to take over a room vocally. It's a good trick, ladies. And so yeah, costumes certainly, and then physicality. What was the second part?
If your process is different.
Different for every part. I used to be very cerebral because I was a very good student and I loved reading. And now I have small children and I don't have time to do anything anymore. And so now it's so much more about the physical world, the outside in, the costume, and then kind of inside, the voice, and then the rest of it. So yeah, that's changing a lot. But yeah, everything asks something a little bit different, I think.
Thank you.
I think Bertha and Scarlett O'Hara have a lot in common. And also the leading lady in Edith Wharton's Custom of the Country. Have you read Custom?
I have, yeah.
Oh my God, that's a fantastic book. But anyhow, I wanted to ask you how you find a way to play a character that's so manipulative, so driven, so materialistic, yet still be the character that the audience roots for.
Well, thank you. One of the things you have to do when you're playing someone is you can't judge them. You have to kind of come at it from where they're coming from. For Bertha, what she's doing to Gladys, which might be offensive to some of you, she sees it as setting up her daughter, who she sees as maybe ill-equipped for the world she's living in, so that she can actually have power and influence. Now, it's the power and influence that Bertha wanted, right? And she's living vicariously through her child, sure. But that's very relatable. It's just on a very different scale. And so for me, I love playing unlikable people, because there's always a reason for what they're doing, I guess. And your job as an actor is to find out what those reasons are. And I think in America in particular, we sort of admire that unabashed ambition. It's something that it's part of that American dream, that sort of pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality. And I think somehow it's part of our culture to kind of announce it a little bit. And we're into it. And so I just can't judge her. I just have to kind of go after it for what she values and loves the most, if that makes sense.
Well, the magic really works.
Thank you. It helps to have a good marriage and a good partner.
But I think also, don't you think it's also because Bertha's fighting against the old system?
Yeah, that's
right?
true, too. Yeah,
right?
she's a change maker. Yeah.
Right? There's something about, even though what she's doing is saying, the old people said, you don't belong here. right? You're new money, you don't belong here. And Bertha is all of us going, wait, we want a voice, we want a space.
And she's calling out some of those things that are arbitrary, which I think people respond to
and it's
as well.
the precipice of the change, right? It's the moment of saying, no, there's new people here. There's room for everyone. We're going to we're going to move forward thinking. I think we have time for 2 more questions, so we're going to go here to these lovely ladies.
Hello. First, I just want to tell you, you are so amazing. I want to be an actor one day, and you are such an inspiration to me.
Oh, thank you so much.
But I really wanted to ask you, did knowing history help you become Bertha as a character?
That's interesting. I'm sure there are a lot of actors who would say it doesn't matter, maybe. I think what it helps is that I really love learning about the world that I'm playing in. I don't think that's necessary to be a good actor necessarily, but for me personally, I find it more fulfilling because I'm curious about that time period and because there are details like, you know, Edison lighting up the city, the Statue of Liberty, the Brooklyn Bridge. I mean, it's wonderful to be invited into those stories in such a visceral way. And so I don't know if it helps me be better at my job, but it certainly helps me enjoy it more, you know? It's like, there's nothing that's a slog about it. I love that stuff. It's a great pleasure. And I think reading is great if you're gonna be an actor. I think traveling is great. You know, read, travel, learn how to communicate, have an adventure. All of that will feed into, you know, what you wanna be.
All right, okay, so our last question will come from this.
Hi, Carrie.
Hello.
It's clear that you're having a career moment in movies and TVs and TV shows, but as a theater person, I want to know, when are we going to get you back on Broadway?
Oh my gosh, great question. Well, Broadway's having some troubles, you may have noticed. The theater hasn't really recovered from the pandemic, and so it's been trending this way for a while, but so many of the decisions they have to make now are economic, and it's hard to get a straight play up and running, and as I pointed out, I won't be doing any musicals anytime soon. So there aren't as many spaces. We actually have fewer spaces, especially when these shows start running for several years. That just leaves fewer spaces for work to pop into. But we're hopeful. We're very hopeful there's a possibility we would take our production of Bug that we did in Chicago after the pandemic, thank you, and maybe bring that to the city maybe in the next year or 2. And we're still working on getting an August Osage County revival. We were close, but our director, it's a great play. It's really a period piece now, but what it's saying about the country is pretty startling. And it's overdue for a revival. But I think, you know, if David Cromer, who's our director of note, if his availability changes, we might be able to get it up in the next year or 2. So, you know, write some letters or something. create a clamor for it. But I would love it. I'm now like over 2.5 years, and that's too long.
Great. Thanks.
Well, speaking of too long, I think we've overextended our stay. We've worn out our welcome at the theater. But I want to personally thank the Massillon Museum and Director Alex Coon for making all this happen.
Yes, thank you.
For giving me our fearless leader, for giving me the opportunity to curate this exhibition, which has been a phenomenal experience. And if you have not seen it, please go see it in the Massillon Museum. It's free for everyone. It's open till October 13th, Tuesday through Sundays. Mondays are closed. And so it's phenomenal. I want to thank Carrie Coon for taking the time away from her family to be with us for these 2 days. She did a yeoman's job yesterday, greeting and photographing and talking to fans for hours in those high heels. And so thank you for that and for spending your time here today, even though we know Tracy is away and
with Kasia.
With Kasia, she's gonna have to look after him. And thank you for Kasia for doing this. It really was a pleasure to speak with you and to meet you, and for you to take your time away from getting ready for the Emmys. You know, you have built something that's really special and magical for a lot of fans. You're definitely both deserving of your Emmy nominations. We do wish you the best of luck and continued success. And we know that season 3 is going to be heavily anticipated, so we cannot wait to see what happens. And we hope that whatever does, that there's more of it.
Yeah, amen to that.
Amen to that, right?
Thank you, Kasia.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. That's it.
I'm so sorry. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that the Canton Palace Theatre is undergoing a large capital campaign to continue bringing the arts and this quality programming to you. So make sure you pick up literature and support the Palace. And Kasia's gone, but I wonder what she's wearing, who she's
I
wearing.
asked her to send me a picture, so I'm very curious myself.
Yeah.
She was wearing my favorite sexy pirate t-shirt, shirt in that. She wears that sexy pirate shirt every time I have a fitting now, so.
It's so good.
It's really good.
Thank
But
you
yeah,
all
I'll let
so
you know.
much for coming. Have a great afternoon.